This one feels hard to do, but like many hard things, it still has to be done. And what's really in my mind is sharing with you about the importance or maybe the relevance of the conceptual idea of whether it's about being understood or whether it's actually about developing a mindset towards understanding. And we all want to be understood. We all want to be understood. I get it, right? One of my videos recently, I was sharing about how there was miscommunication between me and a dear friend of mine. And my deepest desire is to be understood in that situation. You may have had a situation recently in your life where you felt like, oh, if only they would understand me. But the reality is, and I take inspiration in this, not so much so direct inspiration, but as I thought about this topic, this kept coming to mind. But it's the book. I have to show you the back because this is the reflection devotional, not the book itself, but it's the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, written by Stephen R. Covey, however you pronounce it. And many of you who are tuned into this will probably know about this book because it's a very well-known book. And this is my copy of Daily Reflections for Highly Effective People, which is just like a devotional kind of thing, right? Which I got years ago and used years ago. And one of the principles of the 7 habits of the highly effective people, number 5, that Stephen Covey shares is seek first to understand, then to be understood. And I think one of the things that's super great about that principle is, or that habit, let's use the language he uses in order as we refer to his stuff. One of the things that I think is profound about the habit number 5 that he mentions is he doesn't say seek first to understand, full stop. He says seek first to understand and then to be understood. And I think a lot of the time it's easy for us to forget that us having a better understanding helps us understand what we desire to be understood. And as a reader of the Bible, reading through the book of Proverbs, probably for the last 21 years on a regular basis, each and every day, one of the things you find is that there is a trio in the scriptures. There is a trifecta, as you may want to call it. And that trifecta starts with knowledge, our awareness, right? It then transitions into understanding, our ability to assimilate our awareness. Like, what I'm aware of, how does that fit the world I'm in? How does that fit the situation I'm in? And then third and foremost in that trifecta is wisdom, which is, as I like to call it, the application of the knowledge that we have. And the reason why I think this is interesting, when you think about that trifecta and then you think about this conceptual idea of seeking first to understand before being understood, is the fact that if knowledge, understanding, and wisdom are a trio that God himself decided and declared we need, right? And he promotes and advertises through the mouth and words of Solomon, through the mouth and words of David, through even Abraham and his actions, through the actions of every single person who was successful in the scripture, even to the degree that Jesus takes a name in cahoots with the conceptual idea of wisdom. Then what happens in my mind is I start asking myself, how does that connect with seeking first to understand before desiring to be understood, or before being understood? And I start to see it. I start to see it clearer. I start to see that when we seek first to understand that which is happening outside of us, it's developing our knowledge base. And as we develop our knowledge base, we are, whether we like it or not, developing the foundation on which we can have an understanding base. And as we develop our ability to have an understanding base, we then later on also automatically develop our ability to apply what we know and thus develop our wisdom base. And the reason I think this is so profound, the reason I think it's essential for us to have this conversation, for this to become part of what we're talking about, is because in your pursuit for wealth, in your pursuit for health, in your pursuit to be a better man, in your pursuit to be a better woman, in your pursuit to be a better parent, spouse, whatever it is, right? We have to understand something I like to say very often anyway. Let me take that before I talk about what I think is good for us to understand. But I often say to people that even if someone is 40 years old, they're brand new to this thing called life. Because this world has been operating for centuries, for generations before that 40-year-old ever showed up. And that also extends, okay, because I know some of the 50-year-olds will be saying, yeah, young pup, you know that, right? But that also extends to those who are 50s, who are in their 50s, excuse me. That also extends to those who are in their 60s. It extends to those who are in their 70s and 80s and 90s and 100. And no, this is not an attempt to say that there is no value that can be extracted or embraced from people who are further along or people who are older. Like, my family come from a deep, steeped Nigerian heritage where respecting your elders is just part and parcel of the thing. Like, that is typical African heritage, as we should all probably know. But there we go. Yeah, that's typical African heritage, as we should all probably know. But the reason I bring this up is because so often I think we lose sight of the fact that it doesn't matter how old you are. If you are around now, you are new to the grand scheme of the world. You're new to the grand scheme of what's been going on. And this is the reason why it's so important to learn. It's so important to develop our knowledge. It's so important to be open to understand. It's so important to enhance our ability to be wise and thus apply what we learn, apply what we discern, apply what we're able to even earn. And I wanted to share that today because there's a lot going on. Like, if I just keep it real, like, on my heart is actually heavy because of so much of the things that are going on. We've recently just had the whole situation that was going on with Iran. I found it challenging to see the president of the United States, publicize that the people of Iran should stay in their home and, bunker down because bombs are going to be dropping. And you may have your own views on Donald Trump. You may have your own views on Iran, on Palestine, on Israel, on cahoots. You may have your own views on all of those things. And this isn't my attempt to vindicate or vilify anyone. That's not it. Like, if I'm going to be very transparent, I don't know enough about any of it to start telling people what they should think. But the reason why I have a heavy heart is because the Bible tells us that there's a time for love and there's a time for war. There's a time for peace. And I understand that as leaders, we have to be strong enough to say things that most people aren't ready to hear. We have to be strong enough to deal with things that most people spend their whole life facing in fear. We have to be strong enough to be able to call out things that most people would not call out and would just allow to fester and foster, which we all know over time will become a monster. And I say that to say, I don't know what it takes to be the president of the United States. I do not know what it takes, and I'm not going to attempt to act like I know what it takes. But I know how it feels to hear someone declare nationally or globally, because that's what it is, right? It's not nationally. He's not talking to the States, he's talking to the world, but to declare globally that we're about to take action on a whole nother nation. And my heart was just going out to the people, like the people in Iran who, by the grace of God, are, to whatever degree you may call it, innocent. Like the people who have nothing to do with the treachery, the tragedies, and the travesties that have been taking place in Iran for however long stuff has been going on. And like I said, I don't know enough about it to be saying, oh, this is what should happen and that's what should happen. Like I'd be lying to you if I acted like that was the case. But I did want to share that my heart is heavy because of that, because I understand how important understanding is before seeking to be understood. And I also understand that many a times we get things the wrong way. We come out of our homes, we come out of ourselves expecting the world to want to understand us, but forgetting that we're brand new to this thing. Forgetting that this world has been operating for thousands of years before any of us even showed up. one of the things I often am reminded of is when I wrote my master's dissertation for my M.Teach on a black teacher's experience with racism through the lens of critical race theory in East London schools. I referenced a paper which spoke about the fact that 300 years ago, the paper basically said we should all remember that the educational system as we know it today is still in its infancy. And that paper went on to explain that the education system we see today was not around 400 years ago. It was not around 500 years ago. And I remember in around 2015, 2016, as I was reading that specific research paper and referencing that specific research paper, that was a big reminder to me. Like, Samuel, everything you know today didn't exist 300, 400 years ago in the same way. And when you think about that and you realize, well, hold on a minute, there was no aeroplane, let alone business class. There was no aeroplane, let alone private jet. There was no, like, when you start to think about that 400 years ago, the way we see life today did not exist. I think it just reminds me of my most recent video where I was sharing about the fact that there has been an explosion of things to take our attention, but there's been an erosion of the human attention span. It just, like, all of this stuff just adds up. Because in our pursuits for better health, in our pursuits for optimized wealth, in our pursuits to be bettering ourselves, we have to understand that there's some core, deep, foundational issues. And now it makes sense to me why this first stretch of 30-day videos I'm making are talking to you about the inner stuff. Because yes, I could just be fabricating and conversating about here's how you make cash flow and here's 5 steps to it, or here's 4 steps to generating more income on your next property deal, and all of the other stuff that I've literally spent years coaching, training and developing people to be able to do, replacing their income, going from 3,000 a month to over £1 million a month in cash flow, going from £300 a month per property to going to £5,500 per month per property, helping people shift from never having made a pound in property to making £1,733 in property, and so on and so on and so on and so on. Like, there are so many people that had no property deals in the middle of thinking about property, building a portfolio of 5 rent-to-rent portfolios, generating £2,500, being able to let their wife know she doesn't have to finish her maternity leave and go back to work, but she can finish her maternity leave and say bye to work because we replaced their income through this portfolio, and then helping clients go and build, buy, refurbish, refinance portfolios, or at least start that journey. It's like the list is long and the list goes on of the people I've been able to assist in a way that's strong as it pertains to cash flow creation and financial freedom. But the reality is this: all of that doesn't matter if something's not right on the inside. All of that doesn't matter if we can't come to the table of life recognizing that we need to seek first to understand before being understood. And this is why this is so pertinent, because in the world that we live in right now, with things happening the way they're happening right now, whether it be the rise of artificial intelligence, whether it be the statements being made by some of the global leaders that we have in the world, whether it be global leaders in technology, in finance, in politics, we are in the midst of probably one of the most interesting times to be alive, in my opinion. And I don't say that to say that it's going to get less interesting. I say that to say, I assume it's going to get even more interesting. But knowing that we're in a place where it is interesting, my advocation to you, because my advocation for me, is to start developing your understanding of what's going on. And that doesn't mean know everything. That doesn't mean have a stance on everything. That doesn't mean have a position on everything. But I think the best thing that I can share that for me it means is words that I heard from Rabbi Daniel Lapin, who said, in a world that is constantly changing, we will do well to focus and stand fast on the things that never change. And I think that quote, that statement, that philosophy, that mindset, that ideology, that understanding is essential in this time right now. In this time where, as I've mentioned, the school system as we know it is nothing like what it was 400 years ago. In this time where the cultural divides as we know them are nothing like they were 300 years ago. In this time where accessibility and mobility is nothing like what it was 400 years ago. Today, a group of people can put money together and all take advantage of utilizing a private jet. Today, people can pay a membership and take advantage of being able to fly on a private jet. Today, with the rise of platforms like Airbnb, serviced accommodation as a strategy in and of itself, using platforms like booking.com and so forth, people can pay a fee and utilize someone else's house, which is 200, 300 miles away from their current place of residence. Today, the world looks very different to what the world looked like 200, 300, 100, even 10 years ago. And as I say, even 10 years ago, I'm actually drawn to remember what life was like when I was growing up, when we didn't have mobile phones. Hello, somebody, for anybody who remembers that. When we only had landlines or house phones, as they were called. When there were way more, in the UK anyway, red telephone boxes up. When you could get on the bus for 10 pence. There was a time it was like 10 pence to get on the bus. Now it's like £3 or something like that. It's been a while since I've been on a bus. That's something I need to seek to understand before I'm understood. But growing up in a generation where the laptop wasn't what we see the laptop as today. Now it's the thinner the better. Then thin was not even in the conversation. Before the tablet, before the iPod, before all of those things, a society where internet was emerging for the first time. A society where there were mobile phones emerging for the first time. A society where your word was your bond because you said to someone, I'll call you at 7 p.m., which meant you needed to be by the phone before 7 p.m. because the phone was going to ring in one specific stationary location. That's the world we lived in. Where when you are meeting someone and you tell them you're going to meet them somewhere, you have to meet them there because there is no mobile phone to call them and say, hey, I'm running 5 minutes late. And if you are going to do that, you're going to do that before you head out so that they know the message, because otherwise you can't get them the message. You see, we live in a world now where real-time communication has sped up so fast that now we don't even live in the world that we lived in before. The world we lived in before, I believe, was a world of interactivity, true interactivity, where humans were interacting with one another. Now it feels like we're living in a world with such a lack of understanding for one another because we're not interacting with one another. We're interacting with the devices. And the devices, for some of us, are becoming vices. So this is what I wanted to share on this video. I wanted to encourage you. I wanted to encourage you with the words of an understanding that not everything we see today is the way. Not everything we see today was the way. And by virtue of the fact that it wasn't the way a time ago is evidence that it doesn't have to be the way today. But the thing we all have to understand, hopefully, is that's not up to someone else. Like true leaders, that's going to be up to me. That's going to be up to yourself. That's going to be up to one person saying, if it's going to be, it's up to me. I'm going to decide to be a person of integrity, to be a person of my word, and to seek out understanding others before I expect them to understand me. I'm going to be that person. I'm going to be someone who's interested in learning and hearing and developing and discerning because I desire to be a better leader for my wife, to be a better father for my children, to be a better individual in society. I desire that. And it's out of that desire, I just throw this out there, Proverbs chapter 18 verse 1, where it says, through desire, a man having separated himself, seeketh and intermeddleth with all manner of wisdom. It's that desire that that I believe will cause us to get better as a society, to get better as individuals, to get better as families, to get better as leaders. And I know who I'm talking to. I'm talking to label-less leaders. That's my community. I get it, right? I understand that the people my words tend to resonate with and tend to hit home with are people that have always been leaders, but often have just not been given the title, often have just not been given the label. And I understand how hard that feels. I understand how hard it is to live a life where you know on the inside you're a leader. You look at the things you do, you know you're a leader. You can see you're a pioneer, other people are behind you, but at the same time, no one's ever given you the title. So often you question your leadership. Often you question whether you have that position or you should be taking that position or whether you should even be going on those missions, because you're always saying to yourself, but no one's given me the title. But it's because of that I need to say to you today, it's okay. It's okay to lead. It's okay to strip some of the modern stuff back and just be who you see you're supposed to be. Because that in and of itself is what we're talking about right here. That in and of itself is you seeking understanding before desiring to seek to be understood. That in and of itself is you saying, I understand the landscape. The landscape is not necessarily the landscape I desire. It's not the landscape I thought I was going to have to maneuver in. But guess what? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to strip it back and I'm going to execute knowing what I can see. I'm going to execute knowing what I know. I'm going to execute with the God-given wisdom, knowledge, and understanding that God has given me. So I wanted to encourage you. I wanted to encourage you in this video and say to you that you can do it. You can walk in the leadership capacity that God has called you to do. You can walk in the leadership capacity that God has placed inside of you. You can be the leader that you see within you. And on your journey of leadership, be a beacon of light who understands that it probably makes more sense to seek understanding before expecting people to understand you. So if that being said, Samuel Akenwin, I'm signing out. My love to you. Take advantage of liking, subscribing, and all of the jazz you can do on this video. I'm going to love you. I'm going to leave you. I'm going to see you on another one. And remember that it's small keys that open up big doors. Let's go.